Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're popping the hood on one of American literature's absolutely most iconic characters, Jean Louise Scout Finch. We're going to deconstruct the complex literary machinery Harper Lee uses to make her tick and dive into how she operates within To Kill a Mockingbird to help us understand society, prejudice, and what it really means to grow up. To truly grasp the genius of this narrative, we have to ask a pretty fundamental question. Who is the true beating heart of Maycomb? And how exactly does this one kid's evolution from a naive little girl into a morally aware young woman expose the absolute deepest, most systemic flaws of a 1930s Southern town? It's not just about the events that happen, it's entirely about the lens through which we view them.
Okay, let's jump right into Section 1, the dual narrator. A story told in two voices. Harper Lee pulls off this brilliant high-wire act with a dual perspective throughout the entire story. On one hand, you've got the raw, unfiltered honesty of 6-year-old Scout. She's a literal participant in the events, right there in the mud, acting on total childhood impulse. But running perfectly parallel to that, you have the adult Jean Louise. She's introspective, she's sharp, and she provides a layer of interpretive hindsight that the kid version obviously just doesn't possess yet. When you look closely at the academic analysis of her character, you realize this storytelling device is no accident. It lets us experience the deeply rooted hypocrisies of Maycomb's social fabric purely through a child's unfiltered lens. We're not being lectured at by some adult, right? We're discovering how illogical prejudice actually is right alongside a kid who's just trying to figure out the rules of the world. And here's the crazy part. Her completely innocent, supposedly unreliable perspective actually makes her our most trustworthy guide, because she literally lacks the adult sophistication, the mental gymnastics needed to justify the town's irrational prejudices. She accidentally blows them wide open. She asks these simple, innocent questions about race or class, the adults fumble their answers, and boom, we the readers are forced to see the ugly truth hiding right under that polite Southern veneer. Which brings us to Section 2, Rebellion in Overalls, Defying Southern Femininity.
To really get what Scout is up against, you have to understand Maycomb's suffocating social codes. Ladies back then were expected to be incredibly fragile. We're talking rigid rules here: bathing before noon, behaving like delicate, soft tea cakes with sweet talcum, wearing proper dresses, and basically staying confined to strict domesticity, practicing with miniature stoves and tea sets. But Scout definitively refuses to be a soft tea cake. When her older brother Jem starts buying into all these roles and suggests she take up sewing to act more like a proper girl, her response is legendary. Just a flat-out, resounding hell no. And that right there perfectly illustrates how her preference for overalls and rough-and-tumble play is a literal physical rebellion against the suffocating expectations placed on young women of that era. She is straight up refusing to wear the uniform of her society. Every single time she gets covered in mud or throws down in a schoolyard brawl, she is aggressively challenging the boundaries of what a Southern girl is allowed to be. So how does a kid like this flourish? That's Section 3, Atticus and Empathy. Unconventional parenting. It's all about Atticus's incredibly unconventional, hands-off parenting style. It basically breaks down into 3 steps. Step 1, mutual respect. He treats his kids as intellectual equals, even letting them call him by his first name. Step 2 is unrestricted freedom. He lets her wear those overalls, he lets her be herself outside of those fussy social hypocrisies. And Step 3, radical empathy. He actually answers her hardest questions honestly instead of shielding her from the real world. The Finch family porch is essentially her real classroom. It's this quiet, sentimental space where Atticus teaches Scout everything, from how to read the newspaper to grasping the incredibly complex realities of justice. It's a wide-open space for dialogue, which is a massive contrast to the closed-door, secretive nature of the rest of the town. And that's where we get Atticus's defining piece of advice, the emotional core of Scout's entire education. The idea that you never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it. That is not just a nice bumper sticker quote, it literally becomes the operating system for Scout's moral development. Section 4, The Village of Mentors, a Web of Influence. But Atticus isn't doing this alone.
When you map out her maternal influences, this fascinating web emerges. You've got Calpurnia acting as a surrogate mother, offering firm love and boundary-crossing lessons in real equality. That is the polar opposite of Aunt Alexandra, who is just this relentless enforcer of traditional social hierarchy and Southern femininity. And right in the middle, bridging the gap, is Miss Maudie, the independent voice showing Scout that you can exist within a rigid society while quietly tolerating conventions entirely on your own terms.
Actually, even the deeply feared recluse, Boo Radley, serves as this silent, watchful parental figure. Through his quiet little acts, like leaving gifts in the tree and, eventually saving her life, he shows Scout that outsiders who totally reject societal norms can still be full of deep, protective goodness.
And all of this culminates in Section 5, Innocence to Moral Awareness, the Evolution of a Mockingbird.
Just like the title implies, Scout herself is a living, breathing embodiment of the mockingbird metaphor. By definition, the mockingbird symbolizes innocence, youthful purity, and this incredible potential for good that is deeply vulnerable to society's corruption and prejudice. Scout brings all this pure energy to the narrative, but she's so vulnerable to the town's systemic bigotry. The entire tension of the story is whether or not her innocence will be destroyed by the world around her.
Tracking her moral evolution, the shift is truly profound. She starts off as this naive, impulsive kid who literally uses her fists to solve her problems. But then she comes face to face with the true evils of racial prejudice through the Tom Robinson trial. And by synthesizing everything she's learned from her diverse mentors, she achieves this incredible perspective of deep sympathy. She confronts the absolute darkest parts of her society, and somehow she doesn't let it make her cynical.
The absolute climax of this whole arc, it's when she finally escorts Boo Radley home. She stands on the Radley porch, and she physically turns around to look at her own neighborhood from his exact vantage point. She is putting Atticus's words into literal practice. She's viewing the world directly through Boo's eyes. It's just the ultimate realization of empathy. As academic analyses point out, her journey is so much more than a simple coming-of-age story. The enduring legacy of Jean Louise Finch is that she provides us with a literal moral roadmap. She proves that compassion, an inquisitive mind, and unbreakable integrity are the absolute essential tools for navigating an unjust world. Which leaves us with one final, absolutely vital thought to ponder. How can we apply Scout's courage, her open-heartedness, and her radical empathy to confront the deeply ingrained prejudices in our own modern world today? Because if a 6-year-old kid in overalls can challenge the status quo, what's stopping us? Thanks for tuning into this explainer, and keep asking the big questions.